everyone, it's Dr. Adams here. We're going to just quickly go over some key points in our language and literacy textbook. You all have a copy of this. And your homework was just to read chapter 1. I want to, hopefully you've read it, just go over some quick points that you should really understand. Of course, everything's important, but I'm going to go here quickly. Feel free to pause whenever you would like. There's some basic elements that you should just understand. I'm going to move myself out of the way. One is the difference between a teacher-centered and a student-centered classroom. The teacher-centered is the idea that the teacher's at the front of the classroom. It's very structured. The students are in desks. The teacher talks. The students listen. The students may, raise a hand for a question. And the teacher's in charge of everything. It's kind of like how we run a college classroom. And it's not really the best way for young learners to learn. We understand that a student-centered classroom is generally better for students to learn. This is the idea that the students are in groups themselves. They're working together to learn and understand. You'll see that it's kind of a little bit noisy because they're doing group work. They get to relax a little bit. Their affective filters go down. I think you talked about this with Professor Rushforth. And they engage with each other. It's the idea of constructivism, a little bit with Vygotsky. Hopefully you've learned about him in the previous class, this idea that you're in the zone of proximal development, that we learn socially with others, a little bit with progressivism and Dewey. We read that in our chapter, where Dewey said, look, teachers shouldn't just talk and students listen. Students need to do things. And so in a student-centered classroom, we'll have students do a think, pair, share. We'll put them in a group. We'll have them work together. And the students are really doing the learning. The teacher still is the authority and has the information, but it's not so structured and it's more engaging. So make sure you know the difference between those two. We have a little bit of our theory. There's a few you need to know. Behaviorism is a real big one. This is Skinner. This is the idea. Do you remember those experiments with the black box and they taught the mouse to tap the lever and he'd get a treat? Tap the lever and get a treat. And the same thing, then they taught him he tap the lever and then he'd get a shock. And he stopped tapping the lever. And this is the idea that through behavior modification, we can teach students. And you'll see we usually do it and we reward students for good behaviors with stickers or candies. And we punish them for negative behaviors. They have to stay after class. They have to write an essay. There are names up on the board. And this is the idea of behaviorism. We find that it's not so effective anymore, and there's more ways to deal with students through classroom management. There are sometimes it's effective, but it's the idea that you get a behavior and there's a consequence or a reward, and the student learns it. And in teaching, it's the idea of the basal reader, where it says, see Dick, see Jane, see Dick and Jane, see Dick and Jane read. It's these ideas of little at a time and stimulus response. Constructivism is this idea of the student-centered, that students are working together. They're figuring things out. It's kind of when I put you together to figure out the last states of the U.S. You had to work together. You figure things out. I gave you a little hint. I think I did a hula hoop dance or something like that. This is the idea that students are working together and kind of constructing their own knowledge, understanding their knowledge. And this is really where the field of education has moved towards. The other theories aren't so important. Just make sure you read them. I'm going to jump ahead again. Pause this whenever you'd like. I have a 15-minute total before my video runs out. We're going to jump ahead to, make sure you read all this. Let's see. Your principal. We have the queuing systems. You have a PowerPoint where I talk about the queuing systems in depth, and then I actually have another video where I go through the queuing systems. This you need to know the rest of your life. You need to know the phonological system, the syntactic, the semantic, and the pragmatic. Phonics, we know phonemes and phonics. You're going to learn about that. Make sure you understand it. That's about the smallest sound and sound letter recognitions. Syntax, syntactic is with grammar. That's structure and grammar. Semantics is the meaning of what we mean. When the meaning, if I say to my son's name is Henry, he's opened the window, and I'm sitting there doing my work, and I say, ooh, it's cold in here. Well, I don't really mean to say it's cold in here. I'm meaning to say, ooh, it's cold in here, meaning close that window. That's semantics. And pragmatic, that's the social aspect. That's our code switching. The way you speak to me is very different from the way you speak to your sister or your brother. It's the social situation we use language. So make sure you learn that. You need to know that the rest of your life. It talks all about the pragmatic systems, effective teacher, create a community of learners. Those of you that were in the graduation, I talked about this in my graduation speech, how important it is for us to become a cohort and to create that classroom culture. Make sure you read all this. This will be money back guarantee. This will be on your certification exam, so make sure you read that. Balanced approach to instruction. Oops, I'm going to pause here. Great, I jumped ahead. Make sure you read the balanced approach to instruction. We'll talk a little bit about balanced literacy approaches as well. That comes on later. And Common Core state standards. We use in New York State, I gave you examples of them. The New York State standards we use are called next generation standards. Here they're using Common Core. It's most states used Common Core, but many states have moved away from Common Core, but it still doesn't matter. It's just standards. What standard you use, it's kind of like saying, let's eat some fruit. It doesn't really matter if it's an apple, banana, or orange you're eating the fruit. The same thing with standards. We have to use state standards so you can read this section understanding that it's Common Core, not next generation. All right, let's continue on. Okay, make sure you get all this. Scaffolding. We learned about this in one of the other classes. This is Bruner. Scaffolding is bridging the gap between what students don't know and what they need to know. Remember, if you're in that zone of proximal development, you're in the ZPD, it's where students are really, you're in that right spot. They're learning with just enough push that they can understand it. And that push is usually some type of scaffolding. We want to help them learn. If it's too hard, our students check out. They just don't want to do the work. If it's too easy, they're bored, they check out. Almost all behavior problems in classrooms are based on the fact that you're not in that zone of proximal development, that you're not scaffolding either the content's too easy or too hard. So we want to address that in classroom management by making sure that we are in that zone of proximal development and using scaffolding. So scaffolding could be just a quick conversation. If I'm going to teach you about climate, we might begin, and I was talking to maybe kindergarten and first graders, and we had to introduce words like climate and evaporation and weather patterns. We might begin by talking about the seasons and what's your favorite seasons. That's kind of scaffolding, getting them used to talking about that. You could give them a worksheet. That's scaffolding. You give them flashcards. You could sing a song. You could show a video. All of that kind of helps students get to where they need to go. This is scaffolding. This is the theorist Bruner. You need to know this. Bruner is associated with scaffolding. Rest of your life, make sure you know that. Modeled reading and writing. Oh, yes, you need to know these. Hold on a second. Rats. I just paused because I meant to put this on your quiz, and it's not on your quiz, so I'm so disappointed. I'll put it on next week's next module's quiz. You need to know this the rest of your life. Everyone in this classroom. The different types of reading we do with our students. Model is, as a teacher, we model for our students. It's when you're actually reading your book. Do I have a book here? Hold on a second. Well, I have my calendar date book, but it's when, here's linguistics book. I teach a linguistics class. It's when you're sitting and you're reading the book to the class. We model in all grades, even in high school. If you're reading, sometimes teachers will read a page or 2 pages of a really complicated book to students because they want to sit back and read and listen. That's fine. That's called modeling. Shared reading is when you read the book together. That's when you think about the big book. You have the students around you. You are sitting around. You're saying, okay, let's begin with linguistic perspective on phonics. And you're going to say, here's the picture. Can anyone tell me what's in this picture? And you're sitting around. Think about that you're sharing that book, that shared reading. When you're sitting with a group of students, they're reading with you. I might say, oh, let's look at this chapter. Can anyone find an uppercase letter F that begins this section? And students will come up. All that is shared reading. You're doing it with the students and thinking about the big book. Interactive, here, it's when students are taking turns to do the reading. The teachers help the students. That's interactive. Guided is where teachers plan that small, usually it's a small lesson. They're in the group. They all have the same book. And the students are kind of reading the book by themselves and the teachers kind of listening and watching. But the students are kind of really figuring out and reading it by themselves. That's guided. And finally, independent. That's when they're reading all by themselves, alone, quietly. Make sure you know those the rest of your life. Okay, let's jump ahead. All right, look at that. Gives you all the examples. You've already read this. Oh, yeah, sure. You should have already read this. Let's see. Literature circles. Make sure you read all this. You'll need to know that. Building ready workshops, right? English language learners. We'll have a special class, like I have a 1-hour module on meeting the needs of ELS, English language learners. In New York State, we call them ELS for English language learners. Or there's a few other things, but I think I will call them ELS. So make sure that it talks about ways that we better meet the needs of ELS. So make sure you read that. Talks about other principles. This is what you're going to do for homework. You're going to quickly tell me each principle. High stakes tests. High stakes tests, it's funny, I don't think you take them in your schools. This is a standardized test that really determines a student's future. For example, the SAT, that's a test you take that gets you a score to get into a good college. You want to go to Harvard or Stanford or Columbia in New York City, you must take the standard, the SAT, which is an achievement test. It's a high stakes test. In New York State, in public school, we have standardized tests. Every student across New York State takes the exact same test on the exact same 3 days for English and math in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Every student. Those are standardized tests. So you have a student that's in a public school right there in Brooklyn with a student that's up here in Rochester, and they're both in 5th grade. They take the same test. We can compare their English score and their math score, and we really have an idea of what students are doing. There are a lot of challenges with these high-stake tests. We'll talk about them a little bit, but read it. Make sure you understand it. How much time do I have left? Wait, 11 minutes, 35 seconds. How does it? Oh, wait, is that the end of it? Oh, that must be, wait, I'm going to pause. Great. That's the end of the chapter. That's all you need to know. So make sure that you've read the chapter once, then watch this video, and you're going to save this video because all of these things are pointers you need in your classroom or you need a certification exam. Actually, we'll never tell you things you don't need to know. We'll only tell you things you need to know. So if I'm pointing it out or I'm talking about, make sure you spend time to take notes on it and put it someplace you can study later. All right, that's it. Miss you already. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.